Alright guys, today we're going to talk about slope. Now slope is just another word for how the equation that you're dealing with is changing. Slope is a ratio between two things, rise over run, and remember, ratio is just a fancy word for fraction or comparison, so it's a comparison of the rise of a line to the run of a line. Now it's very important that rise is in the numerator and run is in the denominator. So number one here, I've got 2 points. I'm going to call them point A and point B. And to find the slope, I need to go from one point to the other by counting rise over run. Now it doesn't matter which point you start at. You could start at point A or you could start at point B. You will get the same result either way. But what is important is that you keep the rise in the numerator and the run in the denominator. Now for me, I'm going to start at my left point and work my way right because that's the way that I read, so it makes more sense to me. Now to start from point A to point B, first I want to go up or down. That's my rise. Rise talks about, do I need to go up or do I need to go down? Now to get from point A to point B, I do need to go down, and I want to be on the same level, so I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3 units until I get to the same level as point B. Now if I'm going down 3, we can represent that numerically by a -3. Now I need to run, which means I need to determine if I want to go right or left. Now to get from this spot here to point B, I need to go 1 unit to the right. Now to represent that numerically, that's going to be a +1. So my slope would be -3 over +1, which is just -3. Let's try it again on number 2. I'm going to call this guy point A and this guy point B. Now first I need to rise, which means I need to go up or down to get to the same level as point B. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 units. Okay, so to get from point A to point B I need to go up 4, which is a +4 in the numerator. Now the denominator I need to go right or left, so I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be a +5. And a +4 over a +5 does not simplify, so the slope of number 2 is 4/5. Slope of number 3, I've got point A here and point B here. Now to rise, that means I have to go up or down. I'm already on the same level as point B, so I don't have to rise anything or go up or down, so that means I'm going to have a rise of 0. Now run means I'm going to go left or right. So to get from point A, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points to my right, which is a +5. Now a 0 divided by any number will give me a result of 0. So on number 3, my slope is 0. On number 4, I need to get from point A here to point B here. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 units. That's going to be a +4. Over to the right 1, 2, which is a +2. Now 4 over a +2 can simplify, and that gives me a slope of +2. On number 5, I've got point A. I'm going to call this dude point A and this dude point B. Now to get from point A to point B, I'm going to have to go up 1 unit, which is a +1, and to the right 1, 2, 3 units, which is a +3. On number 6, we're going to go, I'm going to call this point A and this point B. I'm going to need to go down 1, 2, 3, so that's -3, and then I'm going to need to go right 1, which is a +1. So -3 over 1 is -3. Nope, wrong way. Now, next what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to find slope when they don't give you a graph, when they don't give you something to count, and they just give you 2 ordered pairs. So it says find the slope between the given points using the formula m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Use the slope to determine if the line containing the 2 points is horizontal, vertical, or oblique. Now horizontal lines will always have a slope of 0. So up at number 3 on your worksheet, that line is horizontal. It had a 0 as a slope. This dude right here. Notice how it's laying flat across the graph. This is a horizontal line. The 0 is in the numerator. It has a slope of 0. Now vertical lines have what we call an undefined slope, and here's why that is. A vertical line is going to look like this dude right here. It'll stand straight up and down. Now the reason that is, if this ordered pair was 4, 1, and this dude right here was 4, -2, and I were to count from this dude to this dude, I would have to go 1, 2, 3 up, which is a +3, and 0 to the left or the right. And notice how 0 is in the denominator, and we can't have that. Now anything divided by 0 means that it is undefined. So when 0 is in the denominator, the slope is undefined, which means we have a vertical line. Now any other result that you get, 1, -2/3, 15/20, anything like that, will give us what we call an oblique line, which is just another word for diagonal. So on number 7, they gave me two ordered pairs, 7, -4 and 4, 8. We need to take this information and substitute it into this formula. Now this formula has x's and y's, which is good because that's how we write an ordered pair, is x, y. But what's different about this formula is we have subscripts, y sub 2, y sub 1, x sub 2, and x sub 1. What those subscripts mean is that we are just going to it's identifying that these two go together, the x sub 1 and the y sub 1 make one ordered pair, and the x sub 2 and the y sub 2 make another ordered pair. Now it doesn't matter which one's your first ordered pair or your second ordered pair. What matters is that you keep them together. So on number 7, I've got two ordered pairs here, and we're just going to make this nice and simple. Our first ordered pair is going to be x sub 1 and y sub 1, so let's write that above it, x sub 1, y sub 1. And our second ordered pair is going to be x sub 2, y sub 2. X sub 2, y sub 2. And it's important that you guys write it on top of your ordered pairs. That way you can keep them organized. Now it's going to be easier to substitute these numbers into our slope. Now our formula for slope starts with m equals. M will always represent the variable for slope. And then I'm going to take y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So my y sub 2 value is 8. Minus my y sub 1 value is -4. So instead of writing 8 minus -4, I want 8 plus 4 over x sub 2, which is 4, minus x sub 1, which is 7. So 4 minus 7. Now we can simplify. 8 plus 4 is 12, and 4 minus 7 is -3. Now we can simplify. 12 divided by -3 is going to be a -4. So the slope between these two ordered pairs is -4. Now the instruction says determine the slope, but then you need to figure out if the line is horizontal, vertical, or oblique. To be horizontal, it has to have a slope of 0, so we're not horizontal. Vertical has to have an undefined slope. Well, we have a number, so it's not undefined. And oblique have a defined non-zero slope. So this is any other number, it's oblique. So I've got -4, so my line here is oblique. Spell it out, O-B-L-I-Q-U-E. On number 8, we're going to go through this again. We're going to have two ordered pairs here. We're going to call one x sub 1, y sub 1, and the second x sub 2, y sub 2. Again, if you switched those, if you had this one as x sub 2 and y sub 2, and this one as x sub 1, y sub 1, that's okay, you'll get the same result. So now we're going to substitute it in. We're going to say m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I want 5 minus 8 over -7 minus a -7, which we wrote as -7 plus 7. Now 5 minus 8 is going to give me -3 over -7 plus 7 gives me a 0. Now if you were to put this into your calculator would tell you you have an error. Some calculators say syntax error, some calculators say divide by 0 error. What's really important is that you guys see that here we have a 0 in the denominator, and that's not okay. When that happens, our slope is undefined, and you spell it out again, U-N-D-E-F-I-N-E-D, undefined. Now when I have an undefined slope, that means I have a vertical, V-E-R-T-I-C-A-L, vertical line, which means if I were to graph it, it would go straight up and down like this guy right here. So when your slope is undefined, when the 0 is in the denominator, you have a vertical line. On number 9, again, we're going to label x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. And now we can substitute into our formula. M equals y sub 2, which is 9, minus y sub 1, which is 9, over x sub 2, which is 3, minus x sub 1, which is 5. Now in the numerator, 9 minus 9 is 0, and in the denominator, 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Now this one is different from number 8 because on number 8 my 0 was in the denominator, but here I have a 0 in the numerator. And when the 0 is in the numerator, 0 divided by anything is just 0. So I have a slope of 0, which means that my line is horizontal. Now number 10, we're going to do the same thing again. I want you to label x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. And we can substitute into our formula. M equals y sub 2, which is 5, minus y sub 1, which is 2, over x sub 2, which is negative 6, minus x sub 1, which is 15. Now 5 minus 2 is 3, and negative 6 minus 15 is going to give me a negative 21. Now 3 over negative 21 can definitely be simplified, and that's going to simplify down to a negative 1 over 7. Now this is not 0, and it's not undefined, so that means here we have an oblique line. Number 11, we're going to have an x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So we're going to substitute it into our formula. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now it's really important. Your y's are in the numerator, your x's are in the denominator. Now we simplify. 8 minus 9 is negative 1. And then negative 2 minus 3 is a negative 5. And a negative over a negative is a positive 1/5. So this is a slope of 1/5, which again means that I have an oblique line. Now what I'd like you to do next is pause the video and do number 12 on your own. When you substitute in your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, you should get 8 plus 5 over 7 plus 2, which will give you 13 over 9, which cannot be simplified, and we have an oblique line. Again, I'd like you to pause the video and do number 13 on your own. Alright, on number 13, when you substitute in, you should get m equals 5 minus 10 over 12 minus 12, which gives me negative 5 over 0, which is not our slope. Our slope, after we simplify, would be undefined, and that means we have a vertical line. Again, pause the video, do 14 on your own. When you substitute in, you should get negative 4 plus 2 over 5 minus 6, which gives me negative 2 over negative 1, a slope of 2, which gives me an oblique line. Now in number 15, it looks a little different because we've got fractions, but that does not change the process that we do. Let's still identify my x sub 1 and y sub 1, x sub 2 and y sub 2, and we substitute into the formula just like normal. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1, so 2/3 minus 4/3, over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, negative 1/3 minus 7/3. Now we can handle just our numerator. So our numerator here is awesome because we have common denominators, which means I don't have to do any work before I subtract. So 2/3 minus 4/3, I only subtract the numerators. 2 minus 4 is negative 2 over 3 over, now let's handle my denominator. Again, we have common denominators here, which is great. So let's just handle the numerators. Negative 1 minus 7 is going to be a negative 8 over 3. Now I need to take this negative 2/3 and divide it by negative 8/3, but wait a minute, we never ever divide by fractions. Instead, we multiply by the reciprocal. So negative 2/3 divided by a negative 8/3 is the same thing as negative, let's rewrite this to make it easier, negative 2/3 times the reciprocal of negative 3 over 8. So now remember, it doesn't matter where that negative sign goes. It can be negative 3 over 8 or 3 over negative 8. I'm just going to put the negative sign in the numerator because it's over here in the numerator, which means they'll cancel out easier. Now I can multiply those together. So negative 2 times negative 3 is going to give me a positive 6 over 3 times 8, which is 24. And now I can simplify 6 over 24. to 1/4. So my slope between these two ordered pairs are 1/4, which means I have an oblique line. Alright, now on the back side, it's a little bit different. Now they're, instead of giving us two ordered pairs and saying find the slope, they're giving us the slope and they're saying in these two ordered pairs, we're missing a variable. We want you to solve for it. Now we're still going to use this slope formula. It's very simple. We're going to identify x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2 like normal. So x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. And now we just substitute all of this information into my formula. Now remember, my formula starts with m equals. Now my m, my slope, here is 1/2. So I'm going to start with 1/2 equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1. Now my y sub 2 is 7, and my y sub 1 is r, because I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to leave it as 7 minus r, over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So 6 minus negative 2 plus 2. Now the next step I need to do to solve for r is to simplify this denominator here. I need to spruce this up. So 1 over 2 equals 7 minus r over 6 plus 2 is 8. So we're just going to rewrite that. 1/2 equals 7 minus r over 8. Now if you'll recognize this, this is back from chapter 2. We learned about proportions and ratios. Here I have this over this equals this over this. This is a proportion. And to solve this proportion, we need to use something called cross multiplication. But before I do that, remember I have two terms up here, so I need to group them with parentheses, and then I can cross multiply. So 1 times 8, which is 8, is going to be equivalent to 2 times the quantity of 7 minus r. Now to solve, I just need to distribute and solve. So 8 equals 2 times 7 is 14, and then 2 times negative r is negative 2r. I can subtract 14 from each side, and I'll be left with negative 6 equals negative 2r. Then divide each term by negative 2, and r equals 3. Okay, so let's do it again on number 17. We're going to start by identifying our x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Now we're going to substitute all of this information into my formula, starting with our slope. So 1/4 equals y sub 2, which is 5, minus y sub 1, which is 3, over x sub 2, which is r, minus x sub 1, which is negative 4. So I have 1 over 4 equals 5 minus 3 over r plus 4. Now I want to simplify this numerator here. So 1 over 4 equals 2 over r plus 4. And then we can group these two terms in the denominator and cross multiply. Now here's what's really cool. I have a 1 in the numerator over here, and when I cross multiply, 1 times anything is just itself. So I don't really need to take 1 times the quantity of r plus 4, because I'm just going to be left with r plus 4. And that's going to be equal to 4 times 2, which is 8. Now to solve, we're going to subtract 4 from each side. R plus 4 minus 4 cancels out and leaves me with r equals 8 minus 4 is 4. Let's try it one more time on number 18. So again, start by identifying your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Now we substitute all of this information in. So here I have a slope of negative 5 equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. That's an 8. Now, I want to simplify, so this negative 8 plus 7 leaves me with an r minus 2 over negative 1, but I want to talk about this number over here. Here I have negative 5, and on 16 and 17 it was nice because the slopes that they gave me were fractions, so I could cross multiply. What's important to remember is this is an integer, and integers are still technically fractions because I can write it as negative 5 over 1. So we'll rewrite that as negative 5 over 1, group our numerator here, and then we can cross multiply. Negative 5 times negative 1 is a positive 5, and that's going to be equivalent to a positive 1 times the quantity of r minus 2, but 1 times anything it's just itself, so r minus 2. Then we can add 2 to each side, and we'll be left with r equals 7. Alright, next on number 19 it says a climber is on a hike. After 2 hours he's at an altitude of 400 feet. After 6 hours he's at an altitude of 700 feet. What is the average rate of change? Now this phrase right here, rate of change, that's just a fancy phrase for saying what's the slope. Rate of change and slope are the same thing because it tells us how an equation is changing. Now that means they've given us enough information to come up with two ordered pairs so I can find a slope. Now, in my first sentence, a climber is on a hike, doesn't give me anything I can use. My second sentence, after 2 hours, he's at an altitude of 400 feet. This right here gives me one ordered pair. One of these is my x value, one of these is my y value. We have to figure out which one is which. Typically, when they give you numbers that you have to figure out ordered pairs, the time is always going to be x. So hours, minutes, seconds, weeks, days, years, decades, months. Whenever there's some value of time, that's going to be your x value. So we're going to have x, which is 2, comma y, which is 400. Now knowing that, let's find our second ordered pair. After 6 hours, he is at an altitude of 700 feet. So time is first, so 6, comma 700. Here they gave us two ordered pairs. Now let's find our slope. Identify again your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2, and we can substitute it in. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. 700 minus 400 is 300 over 6 minus 2, which is 4. Now, the difference between rate of change and slope is we never want a denominator of a number. We always want it to be 1. So that means now I need to take 300 divided by 4 in my calculator. Now when I do that, 300 divided by 4 gives me a nice number of 75. So I'm going to come back to my guy here. 300 over 4 equals 75 over 1. Now the final thing we need to do is put some labels. So 75 is in the numerator and 1 is in the denominator. Now slope is typically something per something. Now remember, slope was y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now y's here, we had 400 and 700 represented feet, so that's going to be 75 feet. Now x's were in the denominator, and x represented 2 and 6, which were paired with hours. So that's 75 feet over 1 hour. So what we say here is that my rate of change was 75 feet per 1 hour. So here's how we write that. 75 feet per hour. So what is the average rate of change? 75 feet per hour. He's climbing 75 feet per hour. Let's try again on number 20. A scuba diver is 30 feet below the surface of the water 10 seconds after he entered the water, and 100 feet below the surface after 40 seconds. What's the scuba diver's rate of change? So we want two ordered pairs here. 30 feet is paired with 10 seconds. That's going to make our first ordered pair. Now remember, time is always x, so we're going to have 10, comma 30. Then it says 100 feet below after 40 seconds. So time goes first, 40, comma 100. Now we can find our slope. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and set up these two ordered pairs to find a slope. So hopefully when you set it up, you got m equals 100 minus 30 over 40 minus 10. Now when I simplify that, 100 minus 30 is 70 over 40 minus 10 is 30. Now 70 divided by 30, again, we don't want a denominator here. We want to make sure that that is actually divided out. So I'm going to get out my calculator here, and I'm going to take 70 divided by 30, and that's not going to give me a nice number like it did for the previous problem. So that just means we have to round. We're going to say approximately 2.3. So approximately 2.3. But now I have to figure out my label. So here in the numerator was my y values. 130 represented feet. And then in the denominator was my x values, 10 and 40. So 40 here, 10 here was seconds. So that's approximately 2.3 feet per second. Alright, that wraps up this chapter. If you guys have any questions, come and ask.